This video is sponsored by Squarespace, the all-in-one platform to build a beautiful online presence. Might actually be my least favorite character. Really funny.
Potatoes.
Hello everyone and welcome to another video. Now guess what? Even though fantasy is my favorite genre of all time, even though the genre I always write in is fantasy, even though there was a point where I was considering writing my thesis on J.R.R. Tolkien and his influence on the fantasy genre as a whole, I have never once in my life read The Lord of the Rings. I've been saying this whole entire year that this was the year, that 2021 was the year that I was finally going to read The Lord of the Rings from start to finish. I loved the movies when I was a kid, I've read The Hobbit, I have all of this background information and knowledge on Tolkien because of all of the preliminary research that I did, and yet I have not read The Lord of the Rings. But in this vlog, we are changing that. So without further ado, here is me trying to read The Lord of the Rings in about 9 days. Now, just in case anyone isn't familiar, The Lord of the Rings is an epic high fantasy trilogy written by J.R.R. Tolkien and published between 1954 and 1955. It is a story about a hobbit named Frodo Baggins who is given the task to destroy a powerful magical ring before evil forces can get their hands on it and use it to, essentially, enslave and ruin the world. The journey takes Frodo and his companions on an enormous adventure across Middle-earth to Mordor and Mount Doom, where the One Ring was forged because it's the only place where the ring can be destroyed. However, conveniently, this is also where the enemy lives. The Lord of the Rings explores themes such as good versus evil, nature versus industrialization, death and rebirth, war, forgiveness, power, and loss. It is the modern pillar for the quest fantasy subgenre. Now, I should warn you that throughout this video there will be significant spoilers for the series because I figured that most of you had either seen the films or read the books or both. On to the video. Happy Saturday. I am going to get started on reading this tome of a book. I am not an incredibly strong person, so just picking this up. How much does this actually weigh? This book weighs 2 kilos, like 2 whole kilos. The total word count for Lord of the Rings is 303,500 words. It says that it's going to take me around 20 hours and 14 minutes. Can we just for a moment stop and appreciate how beautiful this copy of Lord of the Rings is? Illustrations throughout. This little picture of the Shire is so lovely, look at it. Okay, chapter 1, A Long Expected Party. When Mr. Bilbo Baggins of Bag End announced that he would shortly be celebrating his 11th birthday with a party of special magnificence, there was much talk and excitement in Hobbiton. So I'm up to page 45 and I just found a quote that I really love, and I think it perfectly explains how burnout feels. I'm old, Gandalf. I don't look it, but I'm beginning to feel it in my heart of hearts. Well preserved indeed, he snorted. Why, I feel all thin, sort of stretched, if you know what I mean. Like butter that has been scraped over too much bread. Oh my god, Sam is such a sweetheart. I love him. I'm currently up to page 91 and I probably could have expected this, but the pacing of the story is starting out quite slowly. Have we even probably left the Shire yet? Frodo and Sam are with Merry and Pippin and they are traveling. I keep waiting for the specific moment where Sam says,
If I take one more step, it'll be the farthest away from home I've ever been.
It hasn't popped up yet, so I'm hoping at some point it happens. So far I am enjoying it. Like, I knew that I liked Tolkien's writing style. It's just info dumpy, but I mean, J.R.R. Tolkien took like 30 years to write Lord of the Rings, and he wrote it as a vehicle for his passion for linguistics and inventing languages and world building. If there was ever a person who had world builder's disease, it's like definitely Tolkien. He is the archetype for that. The longer info dumpy passages are a struggle for concentration purposes and for engagement purposes, but they're also delightful because it really reiterates how strong this world is and how in-depthly it's been fleshed out. I'm currently up to page 178. I know for certain that Goldberry and Tom Bombadil are not in the films. Tom Bombadil might actually be my least favorite character. Like, the man just keeps singing. I don't know why, but when Sam sings, it's endearing and adorable. But just the fact that Tom Bombadil sang so much. Page 172. Suddenly Frodo noticed that a strange-looking, weather-beaten man sitting in the shadows near the wall was also listening intently to the Hobbit talk. He wore a hood that overshadowed his face, but the gleam of his eyes could be seen as he watched the hobbits. I feel like this is Aragorn. So I got really excited when I got to that bit because I was like, oh my god, it's finally someone else. Hello and happy Sunday. I'm currently on page 324, chapter 4 of part 2 of the first book. Fellowship of the Ring was formed, obviously, between Frodo, Sam, Merry, Pippin, Gandalf, Gimli, Legolas, Aragorn, and Boromir. In chapter 4 of part 2 of book 1, Sam has just had to say goodbye to Bill the Pony, which is so sad. Very strongly believe that Samwise Gamgee is the best character here. He's such a gentle soul and he tries really hard to do the right thing and he's so devoted to helping Frodo. Boromir, however, I'm not the biggest fan of. Now, I can't remember exactly what happens to Boromir except for, I mean, like the meme. I know he dies at some point. I can't remember when in the movies it is. He seems a bit dodgy, so not such a fan of Boromir currently. Page 348. There's a lot that I have realized I'm not remembering from the films or things that are just different from the films. However, I do remember what a Balrog is, and I do remember why that's significant to the plot and particularly to Gandalf, and now I'm stressed because I know that Gandalf the Grey becomes Gandalf the White and I know why that happens. I couldn't remember specifically in which of the 3 films that happened in. So yes, now I'm stressed because the Balrog is here, which means bad things are about to happen. You cannot pass. Isn't it supposed to be you shall not pass? You cannot pass. I wonder why they changed this in the movie. Okay, so Gandalf the Grey is no more. I'm now all finished with the first book, which was The Fellowship of the Ring. The Fellowship is now broken. I'm having a lot of fun reading this, honestly, because it feels so nostalgic. Like, I watched the films a lot as a kid, and clearly I am very overdue to rewatch these movies because there's so much I've forgotten. Like, I really did think that I knew the story better than this. Like, I'm remembering key elements, but there's important bits that I'm forgetting. But yes, the end of the book was good. Boromir was super enthused to go to Minas Tirith, and he kept talking about it. Then he got a little bit corrupted by the ring and then got really weird and aggressive to Frodo, and so Frodo and Sam have snuck off to take the ring to Mordor to throw it into Mount Doom. Gollum is following them. I really love the way that Gollum has been inserted into like the end of the first book because it feels very Frankenstein's monster-esque, like that sort of gothic, there's a monster following you but you can't see it. Felt very creepy, like they didn't know if someone was following them, but clearly it was Gollum. Voiceover Christy here, just popping in to say thank you to the sponsor of this video, which is Squarespace. Squarespace is a website builder which allows people to create dynamic, interesting, and beautiful websites with ease. I've spoken about Squarespace quite a bit before. I absolutely love their platform, and in fact, my website was made through Squarespace. Squarespace has heaps of benefits. It's affordable, it's super quick to get your website looking lovely and polished, and it also has powerful blogging tools and in-depth analytics. Squarespace is a wonderful platform to help you share your work and to connect with the people who are interested in the things that you make. So if you're looking to make a website, head to squarespace.com for a free trial. And when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/ChristyAnnJones to save 10% off your purchase of a website or domain. We're on to the Two Towers. This is chapter 1. This is like the second page of the second book. And Boromir is dead? How am I not remembering this from the movies? How is he dead on the second page of the second book? Like, that's so shocking. I'm struggling to find words. What a anticlimactic way for Boromir to die. Just, oh yeah, he's dead, sorry. Soz, just pop that in there. He wasn't terribly kind to Frodo though, so I don't feel super sympathetic, but you know, the ring is a corrupting force, so we can't really blame him. End of chapter 1, no Frodo or Sam. Chapter 2, still no Frodo or Sam. Chapter 3, at its end, and still no Frodo or Sam. I think Treebeard is so cool. I really love the Ents as a race. I think they're very cool. Love the song. I just need to know if Frodo and Sam are okay. Go back to them. Currently, I'm on chapter 7 of The Two Towers. There's still no word from Frodo or Sam, which is making me really stressed. Gandalf is back, which is very, very good. He is now Gandalf the White. I do need to tell you that the dynamic between Gimli and Legolas, how competitive they are with like trying to slay orcs. Chapter 7 is the Battle of Helm's Deep. This dynamic is making me so happy because it's just really funny. I'm actually finding myself like verbally laughing because they're so competitive with each other. And I remember watching this part in the films and laughing heaps when I was a kid, and so I'm glad to see that my sense of humor has not in any way matured. Yes, I'm finding this just genuinely delightful and very, very funny. Please let there be more Gimli and Legolas throughout the books because it's giving me so much joy. I've just gotten to the very end of part 1 of the second book. This is page 624. Please, with the next part, can we return to Sam and Frodo? Oh, thank God, there they are. Okay, good. That was a whole half a book. It felt like such a long time to wait to get back to Frodo and Sam's point of view. I think now, because the norm with multiple point of view fantasy stories is to cycle through the points of view in a pretty like equal way. So it felt very odd to have the whole first half of the second book just exclude Frodo and Sam. So I wonder if we're not going to return to Merry and Pippin until the next book. We're on page 681, and there's been quite a few iconic Lord of the Rings lines that are in the films that haven't been in the book, or they've been changed just a little bit. Very happy that this particular line was in the book.
Potatoes, boil them, mash them, stick them in a stew.
Hello, it is Thursday. I'm currently up to page 726, and at what point of the story do the giant spiders come in? Because I remember in the movies that really freaking me out when I was little. I remember like this rocky scene and there was a really big spider and it's not happened yet, and I'm like, at what point does the big spider come in? Okay, is Shelob the giant spider? Shelob sounds like it could be a giant spider name. Shelob was, as it turns out, the giant spider. My question to you is this: are the male giant spiders called Helob? There's a spooky cursed image if I ever saw one. Look at its legs! You would think, being from Australia, that I'm used to very large spiders. I'm actually terrified of them because there were so many incidences with large spiders in my childhood, so I'm kind of like, not a fan. I have now finished the second book in the Lord of the Rings trilogy. The Two Towers is all complete. I had a really silly moment just a few minutes ago when I finished this because I was like, I finished the book, but I don't know what Two Towers the title is referring to, because I'd always sort of assumed that the two towers on this cover are the two towers in the title of the second book. And so I've had this copy for a really long time, and so I always thought that those were the two towers. But as it turns out, after having Googled it, the name refers to Sauron's Tower and Saruman's Tower, because these two towers illustrate the contrasting depiction of evil in the book, because one version of evil, which is like Saruman's evil, is like internal to us all and we all have to battle against it, and then the other version of evil is like a godly deity inherent evil, which is the evil that Sauron has. I'm still having a lot of fun reading it. So at this point in the story, Frodo was dead, but Sam has realized that he was fake dead and he's just been captured by the orcs. Merry and Pippin, as far as I know, are still separated. Pippin went off with Gandalf and Merry stayed behind with Aragorn, which makes me a bit sad because I want the two hobbits to be together. Gollum, after betraying them with the giant spider, has gone off somewhere, and Sam is sort of left with the ring and Sting, the sword that Bilbo had, and he has to decide what to do now to save Frodo. On to book 3. This is on page 792. The use of the word nuncheon to mean lunch. I now believe that we should all be, instead of calling it lunch, or, dare I say, luncheon, we should now start referring to the midday meal as nuncheon. Currently up to page 874, and I'm really enjoying Éowyn's character. There was quite a bit earlier, I think on, wait, what do my notes say? Page 816. So here we have Éowyn, Aragorn. There's this bit where Éowyn's going against the sort of gender norm of this feudal, medieval society. Aragorn says, "What do you fear, lady? A cage to stay behind bars until use and old age accept them, and all chance of doing great deeds is gone beyond recall or desire." And so Éowyn, being interesting and subversive and wanting to go off and fight. I mean, at least she's a character who's female and, well, not a giant spider. And then we have this bit back on page 874 where Merry is like watching this person fighting and, oh my god, it's Éowyn, it's not a random, male soldier, it's actually her, and she's just doing a fantastic job. I'm really enjoying Éowyn's inclusion. Never mind, I think Éowyn just died. Well, that was short-lived. I don't remember Éowyn dying, but then again, I don't remember Éowyn really at all from the films. I remember liking Arwen better. I don't know if I've missed her, but has she popped up at all? We don't have that much left of the story, and I'm sort of waiting for Arwen to come in, but she hasn't. I know that one of them marries Aragorn, but clearly it's not Éowyn because she just died. Oh my god, never mind again. She's actually alive. She is hurt to the death, maybe, but I deem that she yet lives. Does anyone die in this book? Tolkien, do you ever actually kill your characters? This is page 976 of 1,167 pages. And we're at the point where the ring is such a burden for Frodo that Sam has literally picked him up and is carrying him. He's just such a good friend to Frodo, and he's like barely eating at this point. He's giving all his spare food to Frodo. He's basically starving himself so that Frodo can keep going and fulfill his destiny of throwing the ring into the lava. Sam is just too pure for this world. Page 1009. And Aragorn, the King Elessar, wedded Arwen. I knew I wasn't going crazy. I knew that one of them married Aragorn. But I do retain that Arwen barely seems to pop up in the books, so she must have had a much bigger role in the films, because I remember Arwen, but I couldn't remember Éowyn. Aragorn getting married to her felt sort of out of nowhere, but here she is. I am now officially all finished with The Lord of the Rings. It's all done. I am now a person who has read this very iconic and influential story. I loved it overall. I had a really good time reading it. I really loved getting to finally experience reading this book. What a journey. I do believe that website that said that this was 20 hours. Honestly, it definitely felt like 20 hours. I'm quite pleased that I managed to read the whole of The Lord of the Rings between last weekend, this week, and this weekend. That plot hole with the eagles is such a big one. Like, I keep thinking about it. Like, maybe when Gandalf said, "Fly, you fools," maybe he didn't mean run from the Balrog. Maybe he didn't mean exit the cave and find your way to Mordor. Maybe he meant go find the eagles and do this in a more efficient way. It's now been a little bit since I finished reading the book. Where is my copy? I always sit down and start filming before I've like actually gotten the book that I need to talk about. This is the book that I read, this tome of a book. Why was it so important to me that I finally picked up this book and read it, and why was I interested in doing my thesis on a book I've never read? Lord of the Rings is the most influential fantasy series that has ever been written. That's not my opinion, that's a pretty well-known and established fact. If you look at the trajectory of the fantasy genre before Tolkien and after Tolkien, it's very, very clear how influential this book was. And so I found that concept incredibly interesting because I knew that The Hobbit didn't have any speaking female characters. And I knew that Lord of the Rings had some female characters, but it didn't have heaps of female characters, at least compared to the male characters. And so the reason why I wanted to do my thesis on Tolkien was because I wanted to look at how this book specifically and how Tolkien specifically has influenced the depictions of gender in the fantasy genre. And so that's why I started researching a book I had not actually technically read. And in the end, I didn't actually end up doing that thesis, but I have all of this research and knowledge and these like really interesting factoids about Tolkien that I just sort of have buried in my brain now because of all the research I did. Tolkien wrote The Lord of the Rings because he wanted to create a new mythos for England. Tolkien drew from Arthurian, Anglo-Saxon, and Norse mythological influences in his writing of Lord of the Rings because he was largely dissatisfied with the Arthurian myths, so King Arthur and all of the pre-medieval myths, and he basically wanted to invent his own mythology for England and Britain, which would explain why this is so large and why he spent such a long time developing this world. Tolkien was also a very, very Christian man. He actually converted C.S. Lewis back into Christianity, and so there's a whole really interesting story with Tolkien and C.S. Lewis. He fought in World War I, he hated allegory. As I mentioned in this vlog, he was also incredibly interested in linguistics and inventing languages, and so that's why we have the elf language and many, many other languages that are in here, and the Silmarillion and in his other works as well. Before I ramble anymore, let me give you my final thoughts on The Lord of the Rings. Did I enjoy it? Was it worth the hype? Do I recommend you guys reading it? This book series for me is overall 5 stars. The second book probably fell down a little bit just because I found certain parts of it dull, but despite the fact that I found certain elements of it a bit dull, I was also delighted by how funny it was, how insightful some of the characterization was, how much I loved this world, and how enjoyable and engaging. I think one of the issues we have in terms of like engagement and dullness is the fact that this story is written in omniscient narration. The second we leave one of the character focalizers, which is like a fancy way of saying, as soon as we're not looking at the world directly through a specific character's point of view, my interest starts to wane a little bit. So I really care about the characters. I want to see what the characters think about the world. And so when Tolkien goes on these like big long passages of info dumpy world building that like isn't actually being perceived by any one character, it's just omniscient. It's a narrator up in the sky who's not like attached to any of the characters. I just found those big long passages quite boring compared to the other bits, but I still retain that the quality of this story is so high and I really loved it. I thought the ending of the book was incredibly satisfying because it was very sweet. I loved getting to see Sam actually in Bag End. I thought that was like a really beautiful like circle for him to go in because Sam, you know, had started out as working at Bag End and he becomes Frodo's equal. I love Samwise Gamgee so much. Like I just think he's a beautiful character. I love his characterization. He's such a sweetheart. I think he doesn't get nearly enough recognition for what he did with the ring. Like the only reason Frodo, okay, this is, I feel passionate about this one. Samwise Gamgee is the only reason why Frodo actually got to Mordor. Like Frodo clearly suffered because of the ring. And I don't know if the ring is like an allegory for shell shock or mental health or something like that. Again, Tolkien hated allegory, so maybe the ring was just a ring. I don't know, but he was doing his best. He was clearly suffering under his burden. But the only reason he got to Mordor, to Mount Doom, to throw the ring into the lava is because of Sam, because Sam picks him up and carries him. Sam was momentarily a ring bearer as well, and so I love Sam. And I did find the ending quite sad with Bilbo and Frodo. Like Frodo was so much more forlorn than Bilbo was, and Bilbo also carried the ring. He carried the ring for a very long time, but he kind of remained chipper about it the whole time. Frodo just got really like sad really quickly. So I think Frodo's story is actually quite tragic because we had all these people who turned down taking the ring. Like Galadriel didn't want the ring, Gandalf didn't want the ring. All of them said, no, we can't handle it because it would make us suffer too much and we would like turn evil and use the ring for bad stuff. Whereas Frodo just sort of had to be the one to bear that burden. And I found that very sad, especially because in the end, when he gave the ring back, he never really got his happiness back. He never really lost that burden, even though he threw it in the fire. So I found that sad. Yeah, I really enjoyed it overall. I'm also really quite proud of myself for having read this whole thing so quickly. Thank you guys so very much for watching this video, and also an enormous thank you to everyone over on Patreon for supporting my channel. Over on Patreon, we have a whole heap of bonus content, so please feel free to click the link in the description down below if you want to check that out. Take care everyone, and I will see you next time. Bye bye.